Welcome to TAP Talk, brought to you by the United States Army Transition Assistance Program. Transitioning from military service to civilian employment can be challenging, and one of the toughest parts is discussing salary. Today, we are talking about salary negotiations and why they matter, how to communicate your value, and how to confidently negotiate the pay and benefits you deserve. We are honored to be joined by Dr. Floyd Ormsbee from Clarkson University. He will share practical advice to help soldiers understand their worth and approach this important conversation with confidence. Let's welcome Dr. Ormsbee and our host, National Director Walter Hurd.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are on your surface when you hear this podcast. My name is Walter Hurd. I'm the National Director of the Army's Transition Assistance Program, the largest military transition assistance program, by the way. Happy to have everybody here for our 24th podcast. We've been doing this every month for 2 years. Really excited. It gets better and better and better every time. I don't know how we're going to continue. We've got a great topic today. It's really benefits negotiation. So we searched far and wide and found an expert in this gentleman I'm going to introduce you to here in a minute, Dr. Floyd Ormsbee. Thank you, sir, for coming. Dr. Ormsbee is a professor and associate dean at Clarkson University. So Dr. Ormsbee, thank you so much. How did you get to be an expert in this topic?
Well, about 15 or 18 years ago, I was asked to teach a course in negotiation and was sent for some training. And as soon as I did, and as soon as I started to teach the topic, I pretty quickly became the resident expert on campus for all students when they would go for, career day or go for when we'd have a job day. And our students will entertain multiple offers from differing industries. And it was sort of a crash course in how to really, accentuate somebody's value and use that value to get them the best offer that they could get and to choose the best path for them as well. That's another important part of it. It's not just about the money, it's about the right path for someone.
Yeah, so that's what we're going to talk about. It's not just about the money, but it's about the whole package. So every year, of course, about 100,000 soldiers take off the uniform. Most of those, as you would expect, go into some kind of employment. And one of the key aspects of employment is the benefit package, the whole deal. Now, depending on if it's a location thing or a career thing or a money thing or a time off or lots of variables, but what kind of things besides salary, what kind of things go into a benefit package? What are we talking about?
Sure. There's a host of things. I mean, obviously there's the salary is a big piece, and that's the piece that many times, at least from just a quick glance, that's the part that everybody sort of seizes on, is that dollar and cent value of the hourly wage or the annual salary. That's a small piece of it. There's a variety of other things. If you're entering the workforce, from military service, or in my case, for my students from university, many organizations are willing to offer, sign-on bonus opportunities, relocation bonus opportunities, moving expenses, and you never know. They're depending on that organization's needs, depending on what the candidate has to offer. And how well they match up for the position that our organization is looking for. What that organization is looking to do is, for lack of a better way to describe it, is to lease a resource, right? If you think about it, the employment relationship is they need something, and they are going to pay over some period of time for that something. That something is your labor, and that can come with a variety of different things. So again, sign-on bonus, relocation bonus. Differential location pay, benefits, as you mentioned, time benefits, so time off or vacation. The list is endless. And, the thing to avoid, is not to fall into the trap of there's, when you look at negotiation, there's two types. There's distributive negotiation, which is single topic, and integrated negotiation, which is multi-topic. You want to avoid falling in the trap of thinking of the job offer as a distributive situation where it's just dollars and cents, and one party wins and one party loses at the expense of the other party. That's not the case. There's a lot of different things that can go into that package, and you've got to look at the entirety of everything.
So let's talk about some of the things that can go into that package. You talked a lot, you listed several monetary things: bonus, signing bonus, moving expenses, of course, salary. There's some non-monetary things too, right? That don't have a price tag necessarily, but they really increase. They can increase or decrease your quality of life. You mentioned vacation time. How do you kind of look at that with regard to a benefit?
So, many organizations will have a set policy for vacation time, but again, it costs you nothing to ask the question. And if you don't ask the question, the person on the other side of the table doesn't know what is of interest to you. So if you have somebody who has a new family, for example, they may be more interested in additional time off benefits than in increment in salary. And it may be more important for them to spend time with their new family than the extra $5,000 or whatever it is.
So let me ask you this. Tell me if this is a true statement. All right, I'm going to make a statement. You tell me if it's true or false. This will be like a test. I'll be the professor. Sure. You can be the student. Okay, we can pretend. True statement that companies, either large or small, probably have some kind of a fairly fixed number for salary because they have to make budgets and they have all that math. But they have some flexibility, more flexibility in the non-monetary thing. So, for example, if the potential employer and the potential employee agree that X amount of dollars is the right, but I'd really like to have more vacation, or I'd really like to have telework or something like that, that there's a little more flexibility on those. Is that a true statement?
I would say yeah, and generally there's flexibility in the salary as well. There's some published research out there that says there can be as much as 40% variance between offer and final signed contract number. So again, without asking, you just don't know. And then certainly, there are organizations that will have, they used to be called a cafeteria package, where here's your X number of dollars as a percentage of your salary that you can spend on these various different types of benefits: vacation time, sick time, personal time, whatever, health insurance, buy down your health insurance premium, whatever it might be. And then it's up to the individual person to figure out where they want those dollars to go. So there's many times organizations are willing to discuss it. Some maybe not. But again, if you don't ask, it's probably not going to get offered. So
there you go. No question, no answer.
Yeah,
so how about this? Any difference in the ability to negotiate, I think, between a large corporate organization versus a smaller, maybe neighborhood community, mom and pop kind of thing?
And I would say so. And I think it can go both ways, depending on the nature of the local, privately owned organization. If it's a very lucrative business, if it's a business that's very rapidly growing, they may be able to offer the same types of flexibility in terms of salary level or whatever it is as a larger organization. By the same token, many organizations, just for the simplicity of being able to administer a very large workforce, will have a set policy for here's what our vacation package is, and here's what our sick time is, and here's what this is, and they don't waver from that. But again, it depends on the organization, depends on the nature of the industry that they are in, and that can vary. And again, you've got to ask, you've got to do your research. Information is power, and the more research you can do ahead of time, either literally looking them up online, looking them up on websites like Glassdoor or Monster.com or those types of job websites, or getting a hold of people that work there, or know people that work there, or LinkedIn. LinkedIn now is a great source of information for that sort of thing.
You just hit about 10 topics that we try to cover in TAP. I'll just repeat a couple of them back to you, and I'll ask you to kind of hone in on those. One, you said do your research. Yep. So what's the industry standard for a profession that I want to get into in a region where I want to live? Is it up here or down here somewhere? I don't know. And then you mentioned ask around, ask your friends, and network. So how does all that come together in the actual agreement when the company says I want you, and you say I like the company, and the actual agreement? How does the research help you, and then the networking help you?
So so when you're negotiating for salary. Fundamentally, what you are doing is selling your services, leasing your services to that company. What you are trying to do when you're negotiating is make the case that I am worth X number of dollars as opposed to, what you are offering, or this benefit package that I'm looking for, and here's why it will be helpful for you. It's an economic decision for the company. They're deciding to invest in or not invest in you or someone else. And at the end of the day, they are going to have some set of costs that are associated with them. And again, depending on the organization, they may not care where that cost goes. Big salary, no vacation. Big vacation, lower salary. But they're going to want to make an economic decision that will allow them to be able to basically profit from your hire. You need to provide them value over and above what you're costing them at the end of the day. Otherwise, they can't keep the lights on, and they can't employ you or anybody else.
Yeah, that's a great point. No matter what kind of business, for-profit, nonprofit, government, private, you name it, they're in the business to do business. So you have to prove how you can help them do more business, better business, smarter business. Let me ask you a question. How about some key phrases? So when you're in that negotiation and you're having that conversation, are there any phrases that you've heard that are really good or really bad that you'd like to leave us with?
I will always advise my students, and I would advise anybody leaving the military to use the word human capital. Human capital, a student in college goes to class every day and they are literally investing in human capital, paying money for tuition, and each class they go to adds to that human capital. If you are a soldier that is leaving military service and you took some classes, great, that's human capital. But the things that you learned and the jobs that you did and the skills that you acquired, those add to your human capital as well. And again, when you're having that conversation about, here's the offer we're going to give you, and you want to ask that question about, is that negotiable? A good way to start that conversation is to, literally mention, I feel that I have built up a tremendous amount of human capital, and here's why. Here are the things that I've done. Here are the skill sets that I've built. Here are the projects that I've led or worked on. Here's whatever it is that I've done. And here's why that's going to translate into me being a great asset for your organization. And that's what that organization is looking for.
Boy, there's another good 10 pieces of advice there. So I think what came to my mind when you just said that is what we call the resume, right? A piece of paper or an electronic piece of paper. It doesn't stop when you give it to them.
No.
You have to really communicate that. Here's what I can bring for you. So it's up to you. I think I can bring you, personality, experience, and contacts. If that's something you want, then I'll bring it to the fight. Yeah,
and that's again, now that a lot of the resume people that at university level will tell our students they need to have a one-page resume. Mm-hmm. So I met with a student yesterday who had 10 years of experience consulting with KPMG before she came to do an MBA. And she said, well, here's my resume with everything spelled out. And it was 2 or 3 pages long. And she said, here's the one page they told me I needed to do. I'm like, you could not spell out all of your experience on a page if you tried. I suspect that many of the people that leave the military have done things that added to their skill set that they may not think added to their skill set and added to their human capital value. That resume will say, oh, I did this, that, or the other thing, whatever it is. When you go into that interview, and then when you're in the salary negotiation, that's your chance to make that stuff shine. It might be that you had a class to prepare for this particular job that you had to do. Okay, so it prepared you for that job, but what else did you get out of that class that makes you, again, a valuable asset? And that's your chance to talk about it. Paper is one thing. Anybody can read the resume and get the same story from it. You've got to bring that to life. And when you bring it to life and you bring those things to the table that you did, and then you can tell them and you can explain, here's how this matters to you or to your company, that's where you really start to shine with the value piece.
Boy, this is really coming back to almost your first topic, which was you've got to investigate and prepare and do some research so that so that I have a different resume, a different piece of paper, but also a different way of communicating with this industry versus that industry and this corporation versus that corporation, because they're all different and they're looking for different things. And I've got a set of skills that can help this industry and I got a different set of skills perhaps that can help in other industries. So that preparation thing really is just a constant thread throughout this whole transition process.
Yeah, it's a salesmanship job. You are trying to sell yourself to a company. I tell my students you should have 3 or 4 different versions of your resume if you're looking at 3 or 4 different industries. So we have a number of defense contractors, for example, that come to Clarkson to recruit. And if you are walking up to a defense contractor, and even if they're going for a business job, then you need to have that resume look a certain way, and you need to accentuate certain things. If you're going to look at a marketing firm or Walmart, that's a patently different position, and you're going to want to highlight different skill sets that you've got there. Or if you're going to work for a nonprofit, that's an entirely different skill set also. So it's not a one size fits all. And the research piece has to do with learn about the company, learn about their culture, what are their shared values, what are the things they want specifically for this job. Then I've got to tailor that one piece of paper that they're going to look at to say, hey, this is somebody we need to look at more. And then when you get at the table, that's when you start throwing the application pieces and the information that you can't get on a piece of paper at that recruiter.
Yeah, I tell you, good stuff. For all you soldiers that are listening, I hope you're paying attention. TAP tells you got to have multiple different resumes for each target audience. And here we have the academic expert just said the same thing. So just like you have different weapon systems for different targets, you have different communication styles and different resumes and different summations for different industries. And it all depends on the research you do ahead of time. So, boy, that is some great advice. Write that one down for those listening. Incidentally, we've got about over 12,000 viewers of these podcasts so far. So I hope you're paying attention, because this is some good stuff here, soldiers and employers. A lot of military minds think that military skills don't translate at all to civilian skills, and you should almost, sterilize your resume of some of that. I think, and I want you to confirm or deny if this is a wise opinion, it depends on who you're applying with. So if you're applying with a defense industry, for example, and you write military phrases, I was a tank commander or a platoon sergeant or whatever, they probably understand that. But frankly, they might understand the same thing at the local nonprofit downtown in your town. What are your thoughts on that? Over.
Yeah, and again, it's sort of read the room and know your audience. And if it's a local mom and pop, I would be careful with very specific phrases and acronyms and that sort of thing that a civilian person might not understand. But then also tailoring that message. So if it's a defense contractor, for example, and I'm interviewing a defense contractor, and I'm just leaving the military and I've been deployed, and regardless of what I did when I was deployed, they likely get it. It's not something you have to go through chapter and verse and explain what the deployment was like and the cultural aspects of it and all of those different things. If you're talking to a local company that you're going to work at a car dealership, they may or may not understand acronyms and the different things that you experienced and saw and learned, culturally or whatever it is. And you've got to tailor that message. And again, that goes hand in hand with tailoring the resume and everything else with that. I just wanted to touch on something that just came to mind was I mentioned before that the amount of the breadth and depth of knowledge that our military people get through their experience of being in the military, regardless of rank, position, or where they are. Those are a lot of the things that we try to replicate. Leadership skills, followership skills, culture issues. Again, if you're deployed somewhere, one of the requirements for our business students is they have to do a global experience. We talked earlier, I just got back from Thailand and Australia, bringing students over there so they can experience a different culture. If you've been deployed, regardless of what you did, you had to learn the local culture and you had to learn those things. And if you're talking to a company that does business in other countries, or whether it's a country you went to or not, that experience of having traveled there, that experience of having interacted with people from a different culture and communicating with them and all of that, that's all relevant. And again, you got to tailor that message to the person on the other side of the table.
So let me ask you two questions.
Sure.
We're talking about benefits negotiation. Here's the first question: benefits negotiation. So that leads us to think that there's some kind of start point and finish point. So we're on the clock. We're going to have the interview from 2 to 3. Then we're going to have a coffee break. Then we're going to have benefits from 3:15 to 3:30, whatever. Is that the norm, or are these kind of all intermixed with each other? It's a continuous interview assessment process.
From what I learned from my students through, because I asked them, what was your interview like, and it goes company to company, but for the most part, the first interview is generally like a meet and greet. They've looked at your resume and there's something on that resume that piqued their interest, or that appears that you've got something that applies for something they are looking for. So they want to talk to you more about it. And that's one thing I always accentuate is make sure that you talk about things that are not on that resume. Sure, address this experience, but then expound on it and add some more information, because they can read the resume. Now they want to know, what are the things that are not on there that I need to know about you? What are you like as a person? Are you going to fit here in terms of culture? What's your personality like? If it's a customer facing position, how do you do interacting with people? And sometimes I've had students that have been looking at, for example, a technical sales job, and the interviewer will throw some kind of confrontational issue with them to see how they react. And they want to know if you're at a client's facility and you're trying to sell them grinding wheels, and you work for Norton St. Gobain, and the customer goes, well, I used your stuff before and it was really junky stuff. What makes me think that your product's going to be any better? They don't want they want to see that you're not going to lose your cool and go, well, this is because but that you can handle yourself, and that you're able to address the customer's concern and that sort of thing. And so the first one is almost always a meet and greet. We want to get to know you, get to know more about you. If they like what they hear in that one, then the subsequent interview is generally where they start to talk about the position in specifics. They may get into salary in that conversation and talk about benefits, where you might be located, and a variety of other things. And then they'll open the floor up to you to ask questions. And that's an important part of that interview, is make sure you ask questions as well, because that can impact what you're going to want for salary, what you're going to want for benefits, and so on and so forth.
Boy, just for the audience, that last little tidbit of information of recommendation, that's valuable. Ask questions, which gets us back to the do research thing. Ask questions about the job, ask questions about the potential, the long term, all those things. Not only impress the person who's interviewing you, but really inform you. You know what? You might not like the answers. You might say in your mind, yeah, this really isn't what I'm looking for. And you can't know that unless you ask questions. So here's a question for you, Doctor. So we've talked about the breadth of benefits, right? Everything from medical leave to regular leave to, do I wear a suit? Is there a casual Friday? Do I wear blue jeans? Do I make this much money? Are you paid twice a week, twice a month, once a week, every month? Is it contract? Is it percentage? Let's get down to the numbers.
Yep.
When you get the ultimate question, which if it's going well and you got a job offer coming, you're going to get a question, something like, what are your expectations from a salary? What do you think you're worth? Something like that. So how do you answer that question?
Don't. If you can avoid it, don't.
All right, write that down, audience. Don't answer that question if you can help it. So what do you say?
I would say myself, the response that because I get that question a lot. The response that I give people that I'm consulting with about this is, my response is always, I feel that my human capital warrants being paid a fair market salary that will allow me to be able to work here and not feel as though I have to constantly be checking the market for another job. Because it benefits the employer to have somebody who wants to be there, right? And if you have to have the job and you take it at a low salary, you're not going to be satisfied, and you're not going to be committed, and you're probably not going to stay there for a long time. And that doesn't help you, and it doesn't help the employer, and they don't want that either. And they may actually not know what your value is, and they may just throw out some number. and it may be a starting point for that conversation. So I would avoid it, and here's the reason for that. If I'm thinking that I have a salary range, so I'll use that 40%, and I'm just going to pick numbers out of the sky. I'm going to offer $50,000, but I'm willing to pay as much as $70,000 for the ideal candidate. And I say to you, well, Walter, this has been a great interview. You're exactly what we're looking for. We want to offer you $50,000. What were you looking for? And if you go, well, I was looking for 55, thinking that you've got a gain. I now know that I can hire you for 55, and you'll be satisfied with that. So it takes care of me getting my employee. It takes care of me getting my employee at a salary that they're happy with, but I'd have paid $15,000 more for. So, the fair market value for my human capital investment, I think, and that's a very business and economic oriented answer that allows you to avoid the I want, because I want is worth absolutely zero. Yeah, because if it were the case, I want to be a billionaire. I'm never going to be. But here's what my worth is, and here's what I've invested into my human capital, and I think that I warrant fair market value for that human capital investment. That's a very different.
That's a foot stomper piece of advice right there, and I want to try to repeat that back to you and make sure I got it for everybody listening. So, if the interviews are going well, and you get back for a second interview, and you like them and they like you, and you think you can do something, and it gets down to that benefits package conversation, make sure you focus on the whole package, right? Yeah. Casual Friday, vacation time. What about federal holidays? I want to take my kid to school, Friday mornings or whatever. All that stuff. It all matters. And when you get down to the numbers part, if it's a salary thing or a commission thing, which is a whole different animal we haven't talked about, by the way, that's much more complicated. But if it's a salary thing, try not to start off with the first number, and encourage them to start off with the number. And I'll just tell you a quick personal story. In my very short tenure as an actual civilian, between 24 years in uniform and now 16 years doing this, and of course the federal government has very specific benefits package. There's no debating. Yeah. Right? You get this and that's it. But in my very short window, I was interviewing for a job, and we got along, and we liked each other, and the guy said, well, what's it going to take to hire you? And somebody gave me this advice and tap. So I listened, and I said, well, I'll tell you what, I think I can do this, this, and this. What do you think that's worth? And he gave me a price, and luckily I had another better option. I said, no, I don't think I can do it for that, but I appreciate it. And he bumped up right then and there significantly. So you want to be in the driver's seat as much as possible without being a jerk, right?
Yeah.
Because as you said earlier, they want to see if this is somebody they can work with.
Yeah.
And if you're such a jerk that they don't like it, you know what? You might not get that offer.
Yeah. Especially if it's
go ahead.
Yeah, especially if it's customer facing. But and again, to your point, try to avoid making an assumption of knowing what they would pay, because you never know. If we had another hour for the podcast, I can give you 5 or 6, very extensive examples of people that. Well, I'll give you one quick one because it speaks exactly to what you said. I had a young lady who applied to a company and went for the interview. She was a single mom, had all of her money invested in her home, had paid for her MBA, and used her savings up for it. So she literally did not have money to relocate or anything. Goes for the interview, gets a job offer. The salary was about $10,000 more than what she wanted or was expecting, but she was going to have to relocate to downstate New York, and she was here in upstate New York. And so she came into my office in tears, and she said, this was my dream job. They're offering me more money than I want, but I can't take it because, my kids are in school. They want me to start in May. My house is, my primary asset. We live in an area that is a very slow real estate market. It can take up to a year to sell a house. And she goes, I don't have the money to relocate, and I'm heartbroken, and I don't know what to do. And I said, so what did they say? And she goes, what do you mean? I said, well, did you talk to them? You need to, they need to, that it's got to be, you've got, if it matters to you, and it's really important, it's worth the conversation of bringing it up. Long story short, they ended up offering her a $5,000 cut in pay and offered her $5,000 signing bonus and a $5,000 relocation allocation. rented her house from her for up to a year, allowed her to work remote for 2 months so that her kids could finish school and she could get relocated. And then she eventually got moved down there and then sent me an email 6 months later and they reinstalled her original pay. So you have no idea what a company will do if you are what they are looking for. And to shut that door by saying, I want 55,000 or leaving anything else off the table. Explain your situation. Let them be creative. That is the crux of truly integrated negotiation, is being creative and coming up with creative solutions. And you don't know what's going on behind the eyes of the person on the other side of the table.
Well, I'll tell you what, communication is the key in almost anything, certainly in the whole job application discussion benefits process. So good stuff. Dr. Ormsbee, we're going to cut it off here in a couple minutes, but and boy, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you coming here, but give us your final words of wisdom. So we know that of those 100,000 soldiers, the vast majority want to get a job. Some of them already have a job, but almost all of them want to get jobs. Very few of them just go fishing. It's great, but that just doesn't happen very often. So at some point in that employment discussion, benefits comes up. So what's the final takeaway you've got for us on that today?
A couple. First, always ask. Even if you were expecting 50,000 and they offered 60, ask. Because if they were willing to pay 70 and you take the 60, they're not going to go, no, I'm just kidding, I'll give you 70. So always ask, because you just don't know. Don't be afraid to ask. A lot of people will just accept whatever's offered. And I think a lot of it, and I can speak from experience for myself, for many years, is fear that they're going to withdraw the offer. If they are making an offer to you, there's something in your resume that they want. And if they're going to withdraw the offer because you were asking to be paid a fair market value, whether they can pay you that or not, maybe they can. But if they're going to withdraw the offer, makes you kind of wonder what it's going to be like working for that company. If you're asking to be fairly compensated and they're going, no, never mind, we don't want you to work for us, what's life going to be in a year? That would be the second thing. And then the last one I would say is, don't discount, the experience that you have and the skill set that you built, and how it can translate. Sometimes that translation is very tangential, and you might have to draw some lines for people to understand how your experience as a stores clerk in Afghanistan for a year translates into you being a good technical salesperson, but the skill set that you built with interacting with people that are different than yourself or whatever it was, don't discount those skills, and find ways and talk to people and talk to them about ways that the skills that you have and the experiences that you have, how those translate into monetizable skill sets that you are then able to go to the market with and present as true human capital.
Lots of good advice on this podcast. So for the listeners, I would tell you, save it, forward this to some of your friends, either hiring soldiers or soldiers transitioning off of active duty, because there's about probably a dozen really gold nuggets in here. Dr. Ormsbee, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your patience and your passion helping soldiers and students in our overall economic growth. So thank you so much. We're going to come back in a month. Different podcast. I don't know how, but we're going to make it at least as good, if not better. Different topic, but I look forward to seeing everybody then. Thank all of you. Have a great day.
And thank you. An honor to help any soldiers that are out there that serve their country. Anything we can do to help them, our appreciation.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of TAP Talk. We hope today's conversation gave you the confidence to approach salary negotiation with a plan and a clear understanding of your worth. Remember, your military experience has value. The leadership, the discipline, problem solving, and commitment you develop in uniform are skills employers need. You should never hesitate to advocate for yourself. The first offer is not always the final offer. Do your research, know your value, ask thoughtful questions, and negotiate with professionalism and confidence. If you need additional support, the United States Army Transition Assistance Program is here to help.